In the flickering gaslight of the 16th century English fairs and muddy marketplaces, where bear baiting and public executions drew roaring crowds, a new spectacle quietly emerged, one that would define centuries of entertainment. In the beginning, it was wonders of nature, God's curious designs, the rare, the strange, costumes they wore. A woman with a beard might be a cursed duchess. In the bustling alleys of Elizabethan fairs, these performers became stars and pariahs, subjects of fascination and cruelty alike. One day, a girl with hypertrichosis covered from head to toe in hair captivated the Queen's nobles. The stage became both prison and palace. By the 17th century, diarists like Samuel Pepys wrote of dwarfs no taller than a wine bottle, astonishing London crowds. These shows moved from village fairs to royal courts to traveling theaters. Philosopher Thomas Hobbes questioned society's obsession with the grotesque. And yet, the spectacle persisted, evolving, growing, adapting. As the Enlightenment approached, science began creeping under the circus tent. Doctors and scholars started studying what the crowd had merely gawked at. The freak show didn't vanish, it was simply reborn. Showmen began adding pseudoscience to their scripts. Terms like atavism and prodigy replaced monster. As the 19th century roared in, steam and steel transformed cities, but under the canvas tents of traveling shows, human curiosity remained raw and untouched. In 1842, he opened Barnum's American Museum in New York City. It was part zoo, part theater, and entirely surreal. Thumb real named Charles Stratton. At only 25 inches tall, he became a global sensation, even performing for Queen Victoria. He was charisma in miniature. Barnum didn't just exhibit differences. He weaponized storytelling. The bearded lady Annie Jones, Barnum's human theater. Some, like Chang and Eng, were shrewd businessmen earning their fortune before ever stepping onto Barnum's stage. Others, like Joseph Merrick, became tragic icons. Merrick, known cruelly as the Elephant Man, endured mockery and pain. His hospital room became his refuge, his first real home. But while Barnum raked in profit, the morality of it all began cracking. Was this exploitation or opportunity? Some performers saw the stage as salvation. Betty Lou Williams, born with a parasitic twin, earned enough through performance to send her siblings to college. To them, the spotlight wasn't shame, it was survival. In Coney Island, on rickety boardwalks lit by string lights and the scent of cotton candy, performers like Prince Randian, the living torso, astonished crowds by rolling cigarettes with only his lips. He had no arms or legs, but he had. To many, the freak show was a cage. To others, it was a stage. As the 20th century dawned, medicine marched in with its scalpels and stethoscopes. Doctors no longer stared in horror, they diagnosed. The same conditions that once guaranteed stardom under the big top were now classified, treated, and in some cases, cured. Audiences changed too. The civil rights movement sparked new awareness about dignity and equality. And so, the tents slowly folded. The freak show began to vanish, one law at a time, one sigh of discomfort at a time. In 1951, Britain passed the Indecent Displays Act, choking the last breath from public exhibits of deformity. In America, criticism mounted. Even Harry Houdini, a former sideshow performer himself, began distancing from the scene, questioning its ethics. Activists like Judy Chamberlain called the shows degrading. Doctors like James Morris compared clinical anatomy theaters to circus tents, both full of eyes, both ignoring the soul behind the skin. Some performers mourned the tents closing. Schlitzie, after the stage disappeared, lived in a care home, but he missed the crowds, the laughter, the applause. Was it worse to be displayed or to be ignored completely? Then came the screen. First film, then television. In 1932, Freaks by Todd Browning, a former carnival worker, shocked audiences by making the freaks the heroes and the normals the monsters. The film was banned, censored, reviled, but over time it became a cult classic. The freak show had moved from canvas to celluloid. In literature, Bradbury's Something Wicked This Way Comey's painted carnivals as metaphors for human temptation. In comics, characters with deformities were no longer jokes, they were icons. Fast forward to the 21st century. Reality television, YouTube, Instagram all became new tents, all without the smell of popcorn, but with millions of digital eyes. Shows like Ripley's Believe It or Not and Guinness World Records spotlighted people not just with physical differences, but with jaw-dropping talents. No shame, just spectacle rebranded as self-expression. Platforms like Special Books by Special Kids let individuals with disabilities tell their own stories in their own words. For the first time in history, the freak was also the storyteller. The subject became the director. And still, questions linger. If you watch someone with a rare condition on TikTok and you re-entertained, are you any different than the crowd at Barnum's museum? Freak shows aren't gone. They've mutated. They appear in music videos, in cosplay conventions, in pride parades, in viral reels. Polite, more packaged, and more monetized. And as long as human beings remain curious about what makes us strange, the show goes on. Maybe the freak show was never really about deformity. Maybe it was always about the boundaries of empathy. What we laugh at, what we fear, what we cheer, and what we choose to remember. Or as the virtual curtain closes and the echoes of the carnival fade, one truth remains. In the dim glow of lanterns under a sky streaked with sawdust and stars, the spotlight fell not just on deformity, but on defiance. And in the heart, living proof that society's margins can become center stage. Taken in by P.T. Barnum at only 9 months old, Annie spent her life. "I am not your bearded lady," she once said. "I am Annie." Julia Pastrana, born in Mexico with hypertrichosis, became one of the most haunting figures of sideshow lore. She was called the Ape Woman, mocked across continents. But Julia was also her story turned tragic even after death. Her embalmed body was toured for decades. A silent reminder that even in death, the freak show refused to let go. It wasn't until over a century later, in 2013, that her remains were finally buried in her homeland, a small justice for a life displayed like a relic. Born in Tennessee with 4 legs due to a rare congenital disorder, Myrtle was a headliner, celebrated as the 4-legged girl from Texas. But what made her unforgettable wasn't her extra limbs. It was her unshakable will to live fully. She married, had 5 children, different language. We mustn't forget Josephine Clofulia, the Swiss-bearded lady with a beard so convincing, skeptics called her a hoax. Barnum responded in true Barnum fashion, offering money to anyone who could prove she wasn't a woman. She wasn't just spectacle. She was challenge, rebellion, and evidence that difference could be embraced, even cherished. Their lives were shaped by the piano keys they mastered, the stages they dazzled, and the tragedy of exploitation masked as fame. They starred in films, captivated vaudeville audiences, and reminded the world that 2 souls could share one body and still stand apart. Frances O'Connor, born without arms, stitched beauty with her feet. It was ownership. Her life echoed the idea that, known as Cuckoo the Bird Girl, born with a rare syndrome that gave her an otherworldly appearance, became both muse and mystery in the cult film Freaks. The costume wasn't disguise. It was defiance. Even in more recent decades, women like Betty Lou Williams, born with a parasitic twin, turned their uniqueness into triumph. These women didn't just perform, they persevered. They turned glares into gasps. They made the abnormal into art. They were not weak. They were warriors. Their bodies may have drawn stares, but their stories invited awe. They stood tall, even when the world told them to shrink. In a world that tried to define them by what they lacked, they taught us the meaning of enough. The 21st century didn't destroy the spectacle, it digitized it. Today's carnival doesn't roll in on wheels. Algorithms replaced barkers. Likes replaced applause. And in this new theater of screens, the audience is always present. Reality television revived the spectacle Ripley's Believe It or Not. Guinness World Records and similar shows brought the extraordinary into our homes. But unlike the old days, many of those featured now have control. On YouTube, TikTok, and Instagram, people with rare conditions speak for themselves. They craft their own stories. They educate. They connect. These are really doing? Learning? Caring? But the tension remains. Are we honoring these individuals or consuming them? But they do so on their terms. The label freak is no longer shameful, it's reclaimed, a symbol of strength. Documentaries explore neurodiversity. Fashion campaigns include visible differences. Superheroes no longer hide mutations, they embrace them. We're not erasing difference, we're embracing it. The freak show didn't die, it adapted. Just like those it once displayed.